The error wall pulsed the room in a slow red breath that made the marble seem fevered and alive. Maya tightened her grip on the frayed strap of her backpack, nylon rasping against her palm. Above the glass skyline, a news helicopter banked, and the panes gave a thin tremor, as if the city had drawn a breath and was holding it. Harrison Blake lifted his hand and pointed as if pressing an invisible button on an elevator panel. "Fix it, and I will write 100 million," he said. The words clipped to fall like coins onto a table. His smile was small and practiced, the kind designed to make expensive people laugh. No one laughed. Rosa's knuckles brushed Maya's shoulder. "Stay," her mother whispered, the sound almost not a sound at all. Bleach clung to Rosa's sleeve, a faint sting beneath the cold air that poured from the vents. On the screens behind Blake, columns of text poured like rain. Critical status flashed in crimson banners. Telemetry graphs shivered and dropped. Chat windows swarmed at the corner of the broadcast. A hive of questions and small animated faces that multiplied and disappeared and multiplied again. The live counter rolled past 2 million in Maya's mind, because the river of comments felt that your system killed 4 people in Tokyo yesterday, the Toyota chief executive said, voice flat as a stamp. A glass of water trembled on the boardroom table. The engineer rose. 50 of them, with faces washed in blue, did what people do around power. They tried to turn themselves into furniture. Maya felt the room in parts. There was the hum underfoot where the server rooms lived. There was the sour heat of fear rising from adults who had stopped blinking. There was the way Blake's jaw moved, once without words, and then locked like a door. Dr. Sarah Carter stood 3 chairs back, a laptop tilted toward her, wrists tight over the keys. A little fog bloomed, then vanished on the glossy lid with each shallow breath. The code was not yielding. It was looping, the way adults did at a crosswalk when the sign never turned green. Maya knew that feeling. She did not know boardroom etiquette or merger math, or how to talk to men with watches that flashed when they checked them. She knew the rhythm of air conditioners and the prickly taste of dust. If you leaned too close to a screen, she knew the pattern a computer made when grown-ups changed things and forgot to ask it first. "Ladies and gentlemen," Blake tried again, his tone a staircase with confidence on the higher step and apology on the lower. He set a hand flat to the table as if steadying it. "We are experiencing a temporary difficulty with our core algorithm. My team assures me we were assured last quarter," the BMW technical director said, the clean edge of German syllables cutting the murmur. "Assurances are not performance." Phone vibrations rippled down the table like wind through tall grass. Maya watched the devices as if they were small animals warning of a storm. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The sound stitched the silence. Rosa's garbage bag rustled, the thin plastic loud in the expensive acoustics. It was the sound of a thing that did not belong, which made it somehow the loudest thing in the room. Blake turned, fingers spread toward the screens as if to claim them. "We have the finest people money can hire," he said. "Harvard and the big schools and the best labs. This is real programming, real mathematics. You do not just walk in off the street and understand complex systems." His gaze slid over Maya and did not stop. It skated on her like she was tile. Maya steadied her breathing to the server hum. She let the strap cut a little into her skin because pressure helped. Pressure made thinking sharper, like holding a pencil tighter to draw a better line. The wall of code flipped from error readouts to raw routines. She could not see the command that did it, but she knew it from the change in how the engineers sat. She liked the moments when the words came out and you could hear the machine speak. Numbers were honest if you asked a good question. Carter tapped. Ira said. Tapped again. A red banner blinked across the main display. Interface verification failed. Type mismatch. Blake did not look. Toyota. We value your partnership beyond measure. The incident is under review. We believe less. The Toyota chief said, prove more. Maya's eyes tracked the cursor. It hopped like a child, keeping toes off the cracks in a sidewalk. She did not fully know what the code meant, only the way it moved. When people were afraid, and tried to make it move faster by pushing it harder. She had watched adults do that to machines and doors and each other. It rarely worked. Dr. Blake, the Ford representative said, voice low but carrying how long to stable. Minutes. Blake said. Carter blinked once, as if the word had stung. The stream chat flared. The emojis rained. The words liability and end and failure repeated so often they seemed to lose shape. Maya's backpack hung heavy with the weight of paper nobody wanted. Manual pages, with corners softened by her thumbs, thick with pencil loops. She had learned to read. While Rosa emptied bins in rooms like this, words had been the first quiet trick. Looking and not being seen was the second. Watching hands instead of faces, the third. On the second screen, performance rods glowed red under white on black captions. Throttle control, brake control, path solver, verification gate. A drop of sweat rolled off Carter's temple and disappeared in her hairline. Maya watched it the way she watched timers on microwave, fascinated by how it decided when to fall. Sir, Blake's assistant whispered at his ear, posture perfect and breath fast. Investors are threatening to walk, then let them. Blake said through his teeth at a volume all could hear. We will be fine. We are Mevcor. We were Mevcor. Someone in the back said, almost a whisper and almost a prayer. Maya shifted so Herr Sneaker squeaked. An engineer at the end of the row glanced back, eyes finding the small source, the way a cat finds a fly, then returned to his screen as if the world beyond pixels could wait. Rosa nudged the bin lid closed. Her hands were cracked from detergent and winter. She had worked in this building long enough to know which doors slammed and which floated and which locked without warning. She had taught Maya where to stand, to feel the wind in the elevator shafts, where the echo was the nicest, how to catch the good light on the mezzanine in summer. She did not know how to stand in a room with a billionaire and watch him gamble lives. We hold to standards, Blake said, and pitched his voice toward the camera and the live counter that seemed to climb by will alone. Excellence takes credentials and training. Maya watched his mouth shape the word excellence and thought how adults liked words with tall letters. Sir, Carter said at last, her voice a violin string on the edge of breaking. We have retrained the models. We restructured the path solver. We rewrote the interface layer. The failures persist. Then try again, Blake said without turning. Maya knew that voice. It matched the one that told Rosa to do a hallway twice if the lemon smell was not strong enough. On screen, another alert arrived. Hospital devices, heart rate feed, desynchronized, risk high. The breath in the room dropped a register. Someone whispered a curse. Someone else typed with the sound of rain on a roof. Dr. Blake, the BMW director, said, "You are out of time." Blake smoothed his tie. He liked smoothing it. It gave his hands a job. "We can do a live demonstration," he said, stress, polishing each syllable. "We will show our dominance across systems." The red banners blinked back. Dominance did not look impressed. Maya inhaled the mixed smells of cooling plastic and paper. Her mind tugged at the loop, the line that kept coming back in the wrong shape. She could feel the misfit. She did not know the German the BMW director used, or the legal tone the Ford representative carried, or the valuations that made the investors' hands restless She knew the noise a machine made when it was made to do a thing it had not been asked to do. Rosa edged the bin behind Maya, the wheel giving a soft squeak. "We finish," she murmured in the soft edge of Spanish. "We go." Maya nodded because nodding was part of the rules. She did not move, because not moving was part of thinking. Her fingers twitched, small piano keys testing a melody. She pictured a caret and a question mark, and the difference between saying, "You are Sarah," and asking if you are Sarah. She watched the cursor hop the crack again. "Dr. Blake." Carter tried once more. "We cannot." "You can," Blake said, not hearing, speaking to the camera. "We will." Silence held the room like thin ice holds a pond. The city hummed beneath it. A bass, the color of concrete. Maya's heart synchronized with the server rack. Downbeat and hum and downbeat again. Her eyes found a particular label. Verification gate. It insisted on being looked at, like a door with the wrong handle. She did not know how to speak to rooms like this. She knew how to say, "Excuse me," at school, when a bigger kid blocked the water fountain. She had said it to adults who did not move. She always said it anyway. "Excuse me," she said. She did not raise her voice. She made it clear. Heads turned toward a point the room had not considered a point. Blake's face darkened as if a cloud had passed. "Not now, sweetheart. The adults are working." Heat rose in Maya's cheeks, not embarrassment so much as the warmth that comes with precision. She took a small step forward. The backpack bumped her spine. "I think I see something," she said. Nervous laughter skittered along the investor row, sharp and relieved and quickly ashamed. The Ford representative looked at the Toyota chief, who did not smile. Blake gestured broadly at the screens, conductor to a broken orchestra. "Yes, obviously it is not functioning," he said. "That is why we have 50 experts. It is not broken," Maya said, and heard how risky that sounded, and loved the risk, because it was true. "It does not understand what you are asking." A hush, more complete than silence, followed, the kind where even electronics seemed to wait. Dr. Carter's eyes narrowed, following the line of Maya's gaze through the thicket of code to a single branch. She did not speak. Her fingers loosened over the keys, as if an unseen pressure had lifted. "Programming does not work that way," Blake said, smile returning as a blade laid flat. "May I show you?" Maya asked. The live counter climbed in the corner like a tide. Somewhere in the wall of blue-lit faces, someone inhaled and did not exhale for 3 beats. "I would like to see what the child suggests," the Toyota chief said, curiosity finally outrunning caution. Blake stood at the edge of a public choice. Refuse and look small and frightened. Accept and risk being replaced by a child. He found a shape of consent with the temperature of refusal. "Fine," he said, each letter costly. "Dr. Carter, let her demonstrate whatever she believes she sees. When nothing happens, we will return to serious work." Maya stepped toward the workstation. The aluminum rested cool beneath her wrist. She smelled the faint salt of skin on the keys and the citrus of a recently wiped screen. Lines of text jittered, jostled by hurried hand. She did not sit. She leaned, careful as a cat deciding whether a porch was safe. Her finger rose, small and ink-smudged, toward a single place where the program told a system what it was when it meant to ask what it was. "Here," Maya said. "You are telling, you should be asking." Carter followed the tap. A breath left her as if a splinter had worked free. She pressed a key. Then another, the smallest change a hand can make. "Enter." The room held its breath. For a heartbeat. More errors fell like hail. Then red softened to amber, and amber slipped into green. The way a traffic system finally reads itself correctly. Phones erupted. A sound like summer rain on tin roofs rolled across the table as messages burst through pockets. Shoulders dropped a little along the engineer row, as if knots at the base of necks had been untied. Maya did not smile yet. She listened for the hum to align. It did. A lucky guess does not make a programmer, Blake announced, already building a new platform over the hole in the old one. Maya's hand found the strap again. Pressure steadied hair. She felt the next line arrive as surely as a train, and she let it wait. She watched, and the room watched her watching. Carter tore a printout from the tray. Time stamped in the corner, circled in red. Ink sank into paper like a promise. Outside, the helicopter made another pass. Light feathered across the polished wood and then slid away. "Is the kid running the room?" Someone typed, the words tumbling through the river of comments. A ripple of laughter flickered and died. Performance charts climbed, the air changed shape. Rosa's hand brushed Maya's elbow. Barely there, a small anchor. Blake tapped his tie flat again and faced the camera and the world. Let the kid touch the machine for 1 minute. The green bars held like a pulse, learning calm, and the room remembered how to breathe. Keys resumed their nervous chatter. A printer exhaled a page into the quiet. Beyond the glass, a siren slid past and thinned into nothing, as if the city were easing away from the edges of this room. Maya did not move from the workstation. She kept her hand above the keys without touching, the cool metal of the laptop edging into the skin of her wrist. She watched the numbers steady and looked to Dr. Sarah Carter, whose shoulders had lowered by the width of a breath. "May I see the list you used to speak to the car?" Maya asked. "The one for the questions." Carter's glance went to Harrison Blake and returned. He had not nodded. He had not refused. He watched the green and pretended it was always meant to be there. Carter turned the screen toward Maya and dimmed the brightness. A small step so the letters sharpened. The engineer rows bent closer in their chairs without admitting it. Investors at the polished table held phones halfway down, as if any lower might break a spell. At the edge of the carpet, Rosa stood with the trash bag twisted in her hands until the white of her knuckles showed. The plastic cut faintly into her skin. Maya let her finger hover over the glass, tracing a route from one module name to the next. It felt like walking unlit hallways she already knew, the way familiar corners announce themselves to the feet. "Here," Maya said, and the nail made a soft squeak on the glass. "You are telling the brake to clamp." "You mean to ask how hard?" Carter's mouth opened and closed. She pressed backspace, then replaced a symbol with the softest touch. Not a rewrite so much as a correction, as if setting a picture straight on a hook. The change sat there like a neat new hinge. She hit the enter key. The bar for brake control lifted by a calm breath. The thin red rim softened to amber and then slid entirely into green. A collective sound rose, part relief and part apology and part awe. The Ford representative stopped a message mid-word and stared as if a thought had been stolen from his head and returned improved. The BMW technical director, precise even in surprise, scribbled a note with the unconscious need to cage a thought on paper. The Toyota chief executive did not move at all. He watched in a way that felt like measuring. Maya stayed with the code until the sound under the floor lined up with what she saw. The server hum, found the right pitch, and held it, like breath caught into alignment. He does not know she has learned from their discarded manuals for years. The sentence arrived like a secret told into a dark theater. No one in the room heard it. It belonged to those watching at a distance, and to the quiet weight in Maya's backpack, where a thick spine of paper pressed against fabric. Carter tore the new page from the printer and circled the shift with a red marker. She wrote the time beside it in red block letters. The words, neat and certain. She laid the page flat, a palm anchoring it like a corner of a map. "Luck repeats." An engineer muttered, a private thought that escaped and tried to pretend it had not. Blake found his voice and planed it smooth. "You have corrected a trivial nit in the interface," he said. "It was on our list." Maya let the word trivial pass as if it were a paper boat in gutter water. She skimmed the interface file again. The list moved under her fingertip like a street map. She did not understand everything about the math prints beneath the words. She understood the motion of asking. She had followed the shape of questions through screen captures, left open on empty desks, while Rosa finished a floor. She had drawn the path of them on the back of a receipt with a dull pencil and smudged the soft graphite with the side of her hand. "Can you open throttle and navigation together?" she asked. Carter split the screen into twins and then into 4 panes. The laptop fan began to lift a little wind against Maya's wrist, warm and metallic. The smell of it joined the lemon cleaner on Rosa's apron and the cold bite of conditioned air. Rosa stepped 1 foot onto the carpet and stopped at the seam. As if the room might rescind the permission, she looked at Maya's feet. She looked at the exit sign. She looked at Blake. Her eyes returned to her daughter like a touch. Maya pointed again without pressing the glass. "Here," she said. "You tell the car to speed up." "You mean to ask how quickly?" Carter followed the small trail without question. Now, fingers moving with care, she made the smallest change, the kind that feels too slight to matter, until the machine answers back. On the evidence panel, the long rods lifted. The shaky chatter of navigation smoothed. The loaded system relaxed into itself like a long muscle finding the length it prefers. The stream counter climbed. In the corner box, comments braided into a river. Some used words Maya did not know but could feel. Some used words she had heard in other rooms when adults forgot who could hear them. There were hearts in rows and then in floods. A verified account wrote that the kid had receipts, and a braided thread of replies unfurled under it. Outrage and laughter and praise knotted together. "Dr. Carter," the Toyota chief said in a voice that seemed more private than the room allowed, "how many places can this be wrong?" Carter did not answer him at once. Her eyes ran along the path of Maya's finger. She pressed the print key again. The page came warm. She wrote the hour in the corner in red words, not numbers, and underlined it once. She slid the page atop the last and put her palm on both, as if to keep them from drifting. Blake turned to the camera with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "We will not allow experimental modifications to distract from our broader plan," he said. "We have a process. We are examining the process," the BMW director said, voice thin and sharp as a blade laid flat on silk. The sentence left a cool patch on the table and hung there. Carter tapped the stack with the cap of her marker, as if to count thought instead of pages. "We have repeatable results," she murmured. "We have timestamps. We have evidence." The plastic knot in Rosa's hands loosened. The trash bag sighed against the bin and settled. She wiped her palm on her apron without looking and looked again at the clock on the wall. Her eyes returned to Maya with a question in them that her mouth left unspoken. "Are you safe? Are you sure?" Maya eased closer to Carter's shoulder, enough to share the glow from the display. "Do you have the manuals?" she asked. "Soft, like a favor." "Digital only," Carter said. "We sent print to storage." She paused. A small crease formed between her eyes. "Why?" Maya nodded. She had watched a clerk push binders into a carton with a label half peeled, the word deprecated haunting through the tear. The carton had sat near a utility closet for many days, and then it had not. She slid down the zipper on her backpack. The sound was small, teeth of metal walking home. The room did not notice, but Carter's peripheral vision caught the motion, and Rosa's did, and Rosa's small intake of breath was audible only to those two. Maya lifted the thick manual, wrapped in a grocery bag to protect it from mops and rain. The cover had gone pale where sun had found it. The corners were furred with long use. In the margins, pencil marks breathed, loops and underlines and question ticks in a tight child's hand that had learned to write in the buzz of vents. "Where did you get that?" Carter asked, her voice a little too even. "Discard," Rosa said before Maya could answer, the last sound softened by her tongue. "They leave. We take paper to read. It is nothing." It was not nothing. The way Carter's eyes moved between the title on the cover and the tab name on the screen said so. The way the room tilted said so. Maya set the manual on the table and opened to the chapter that matched the light on the laptop. The grocery bag made a rustle like dry leaves. The pages held the faint scent of lemon water from a mop bucket that had sloshed too near. Maya tapped the pencil circle around the exact line that had sat on the screen a minute earlier. A small square of eraser grit clung to the corner of the page. Her handwriting leaned toward the margin, in the same way it had leaned toward answers when she made it. Carter looked at Blake, and then back to the page. The red camera light made a pinprick of attention in the glass wall. Beyond it, another helicopter pass laid a thin tremor across the window. Carter nodded once. She wrote the hour beside the pencil mark in red words and added a short line. She wrote the word matched with a steady hand, though not romanticized trash, Blake said, and the smile he wore tore a little at the edge. A child with a pen is not a validation suite. The Ford representative spoke, as if reminding a friend not to miss the obvious. "It is traceable," he said, "and it is correct." The BMW director tapped his pen once on the table and let it rest. "Ask your question," he said without sentiment. "Where else?" Maya turned a page. The pencil ghosts were there before she looked. She placed a finger on the corner and bent it until the paper made a tiny cracking sound. She listened to it and then pointed again. "Navigation," she said. "Here." "You tell the path to snap. You should ask if it is safe enough to snap." Carter's hands worked with the calm of long practice. She made the correction, not the code's soul, only the sentence it heard. On the right, the chart steadied and found a clean line that did not jitter anymore. The stream comments lagged half a breath behind, and then caught up. "The kid has receipts," repeated, braided with the clip of Blake pointing, already looped by hands far away, and captioned by strangers. Rosa's face went a little pale. Maya did not look at the corner of the screen. She kept her eyes where the questions lived. Carter printed again and stamped the time in words. She signed her name in the lower corner. The pen left a soft groove. She pulled a manila envelope from a drawer and slid the stack inside. She wrote interface corrections, one in small, neat letters. She dated the tab with words and closed the flap. "Chain of custody began without proclamation. Dr. Carter," the Toyota chief said, "what will you do with those?" "Keep them clean," Carter said. "Count them, sign them, hand them over to the right hands, and write down when." Rosa breathed out, a sound like a drawer closing softly. She looked at the manual once more, at the pencil marks that were younger than the morning. Blake adjusted his tie, which had been adjusted so many times it knew the shape of his nerves. He turned back to the camera. "This is an internal demonstration," he said, words smooth, eyes hard. "We admit no defects. We explore possibilities." The BMW director wrote the word defects in his notes without any cloak of quotation around it. Maya closed the manual part way and kept a finger inside like a bookmark. The page corner tickled her knuckle. The cardboard cover had grown soft where she had held it too often. She remembered sitting in a stairwell with it open on her lap while Rosa checked the next floor. The light yellow and patient, the air still and smelling of cleaner. Today the light was winter white, and smelled like money. The words were unchanged. "May I see the hospital section?" Maya asked. Carter paused. "That system is separate," she said. "We only mirror data here. We do not run from this floor. We will not change it," Maya said. "We will only look." Carter pulled the module into view. Labels scrolled down like a glossary of vital signs. Maya felt Rosa go very still behind her. She felt a row of engineers lean with their eyes. She did not touch. She read a line, then the next, and pointed without pressure. "Here you tell a value to update," she said. "You want to ask whether the value belongs to the right patient." Carter's hand moved of its own accord and then stopped short of the enter key. She mirrored the change in a sandbox. The small test heartbeat did not slip when the lab result arrived. A fuse that had quietly sparked for months refused to spark at all. Carter printed and stamped and signed. The red ink looked like a seal. She slid the page into a second envelope and wrote "Hospital Mirror Evidences" and dated it with words. She placed both envelopes side by side like two sleeping animals and rested a palm on each in turn, counting silently. Rosa took a small step onto the carpet and stayed, as if the floor might accept her now. She pressed the heel of her hand to her chest and then let it fall. The scent of lemon water mixed with the warm electrical smell rising off the laptop. Maya pushed the manual toward Carter. "You can keep this," she said. "I wrote in pencil." Rosa half reached, a reflex tugging at her hand. "Maya, that is your book," she said. "It belongs here." Maya said, "We will return it properly," Carter said, voice low and fierce, in a way that meant promise. She slid the manual into a clear sleeve, as if it were a fragile photograph, and not a binder rescued from a hallway. The screens held steady. Green had the courtesy to be quiet. Maya looked down the list and saw the familiar shape of another mistake waiting further on. She did not know what would happen when she pointed it out. She knew the difference between telling and asking. She knew how to listen when a machine finally answered. Blake faced the room again, gathering himself around a story that was smaller than what had happened. "That is enough," he said, the words polished to a shine. "We will resume our planned sequence. The child has had her minute." Carter checked the wall clock and wrote the hour in words on the top page. She sealed the envelope with a firm heel of her hand. She looked at Maya's small fingers, and then at the turning of the second hand, and something in her face changed, a quiet decision, settling where doubt had lived. Rosa smoothed a flyaway strand of hair at Maya's crown and left her palm there for a heartbeat. Maya took the warmth and put it somewhere safe inside her. She did not close her eyes. She did not need to. The helicopter made another pass. Light slid across the polished table and climbed the aluminum lid, then spilled over onto Maya's wrist, like something alive. She watched it go. The room watched her watching, and somewhere, the counter the room could not see continued to climb. Green steadied and held. Not a mercy flash, not an accident, but a calm that taught the room how to breathe again. Keystrokes softened from panic into weather, a light rain deciding on a pattern across metal keys. The printer drew a page through its throat and set it gently into the open palm of Dr. Sarah Carter, as if the paper had chosen its witness. Maya kept the small, respectful distance between her fingers and the keyboard. The edge of the aluminum case pressed a cool line into her wrist, a quiet anchor she did not need but welcomed. Beneath the floor, the hum of machines shifted half a step lower, then matched the quiet green on the screens. She felt the click of that match inside her chest, a hinge settling true. Around the table, the investors let their phones drift lower, as if embarrassed by the angle of their own attention. The engineers leaned without admitting it, the way iron filings lean toward a magnet while pretending the table is the reason. The glass wall held a pale winter city beyond, and somewhere above the avenue a helicopter turned another slow circle that sent a faint tremor down the window into everyone's shoes. Harrison Blake found his smile again and fitted it to his face like a polished coin slipped back into a pocket. "A lucky guess does not make a programmer," he said, laying the words on the glossy wood as if he meant them to stick there. Maya did not answer. She watched Dr. Carter spread the warm printout on the table and strike a red ring around the lifted metric, then write the hour in firm letters along the margin. The pen left a shallow groove. The paper would remember even if the ink was lost. The page looked like a wound mapped and treated. "Show me the first place you looked before this," Maya said, her voice small and very clear. Carter toggled to a previous run and slid the window beside the present state, red stacked like fallen bricks across the earlier screen. She laid the new page on top of the old and pressed it flat with her palm, as if covering a wound that had stopped bleeding. Her free hand reached for the print key again without looking, as if evidence had become a rhythm. Maya unzipped her backpack and drew the manual out of its grocery sleeve, with the deliberate care of someone carrying water. The paper whispered against plastic. She opened to the chapter that mirrored the living code and set the book close to the laptop where both could breathe. Pencil shadows in the margins breathed and looped and rested, like a trail she had left for a future self to follow. "Here," she said, tapping a ringed sentence that matched the line on Carter's screen before the small correction. And here, a few soft specks of eraser grit glinted in the crease like a pinch of salt. Carter's eyes widened by a fraction. She glanced from the pencil ring to the red ring on the printout, then wrote the word matched beside Maya's mark and dated it in words. She pressed her lips together for a heartbeat and then let them soften, as if some private resistance had decided to sit down. On the live stream panel, the river of text thickened. Someone typed that the kid had receipts, and the thread braided under it into laughter and outrage and praise tied together. A line appeared that said, "Teach the room how to ask," and it drew hearts in neat little rows. Blake angled his chin toward the camera. "We appreciate youthful enthusiasm," he said, and when the word left his mouth, it turned into something smaller. "We also respect the rigor of formal process. We will return to our planned demonstration." "We are watching the demonstration," the BMW director said, voice light enough to cut fruit. "We prefer this version." Carter slid a clear sleeve across the manual and the printout and smoothed the plastic with a spare hand, then signed the outside in red strokes. Her name, the hour in words, the location in words, a short line that read, "Interface correction set 1. She handled the bundle as if it were glass. Maya leaned a little closer. She did not need to touch the keys to feel where the next wrong sentence waited inside the machine. Questions had a smell, at least to her. They smelled like cool air after a window opened. Commands smelled warmer, a little stale, like a room no one had aired. She pointed at the next junction without smudging the glass. "The navigation block tells the path to snap," she said. "It should ask whether snapping is safe enough given the new inputs." Carter moved with the economy of a tailor finishing a seam. She replaced the wrong symbol with the right one, not a rewrite, barely a nudge. She pressed the enter key. On the side panel, the jagged saw of the path steadied and drew a clean line that climbed, rested, and climbed again. The green deepened as if it had found shade. A soft sound came from the investor row, somewhere between a breath and a word. A phone rose, fell, rose again, not certain whether to witness or to hide. Maya looked away from the screen and into the room. Blake's face had become a statue of something noble, that once had been a man. The Toyota chief sat very still, and in that stillness there was movement, the quiet turn Rosa made when she decided a floor was not clean enough, and doubled back without saying so. Carter printed again. Warm air from the tray carried the smell of toner into the citrus from Rosa's apron and the bright metal scent from the laptop fan. Carter wrote the hour in letters along the corner, underlined the words once, signed the lower edge, and slid the page into the waiting sleeve with a gentle pat. The package had begun to take the shape that law understands. The hospital mirror belongs in a separate sleeve, Maya said without turning. Carter nodded, as if she had been waiting to hear that. She drew a second envelope from a drawer and labeled it with the same tidy hand, slid in the page where the test heartbeat had stopped slipping, wrote the hour in words and a line that read sandbox verification only bowed-to-ours that all bowed, then sealed it with the heel of her hand. She set both envelopes side by side like two calm animals and rested a palm on each, counting silently. Blake's assistant bent and whispered urgency at his ear, then straightened and washed his face clean. Blake did not look up. He stared at the green as if he were waiting for it to betray him on camera. "You changed nothing fundamental," he said at last, voice soft and cold. "You wiggled symbols at the edge. Any junior developer could do it, given time." Maya looked at him for the space of a slow breath. Then she returned to the code. "Computers do not care who asks," she said. "They care whether the question is clear." A few engineers smiled the way soldiers smile when a small truth lands and fits. It was not defiance. It was relief with manners. The river of comments laid down another wave. The small truth just beat the big title. Someone wrote, a second line followed, asking for the questions to be taught to the room. The hearts returned, and with them a few hammers, as if the audience wanted to build something out of this. Rosa stepped fully onto the carpet and stood as if she had reached a dock. She touched the manual with 2 fingers, then folded her hands together again, practicing the art of letting go. Carter brought the cursor back to the block, labeled Verification Gate, the name that had first tugged at Maya's attention. "Show me where you felt it first," she said, asking like a teacher who wants others to trace the path. Maya moved her finger in the air above the glass, following the invisible line from input to check to response. "It is like a knock," she said. "If you change the lock before you check who is at the door, you lock out the answer." Carter's mouth bent into the beginning of a smile. "That is very close to how the specification tried to say it," she said. She tapped the print key again. The page slid into her hand. Across the top, she wrote a title in red letters, wrote the hour in words, wrote the date in words, and added a short line that read, "Operator corrections, not model retrain." Blake lifted his hands toward the giant architecture map. His assistant had wheeled to the center. "We will now proceed to the guided tour," he announced for the camera, his voice bright with a host's patience. Lines and nodes spread like a nest across the display, beautiful to the bird that had built it, and tangled to anyone who had to live inside it. The BMW director did not look at the nest. He looked at Maya. "How many lines like that?" he asked, not unkindly, as if he were placing a bridge plank and inviting her to step. Maya let her eyes travel across the interface, list the way she had walked the mezzanine with Rosa on evenings, when the sun turned the granite warm and kind. She did not count with numbers. She counted with feeling. She placed her palm above the glass and drew it back. "Enough," she said. "Enough to matter." Everywhere a machine speaks to another machine and forgets to listen first. Quiet settled with the weight of attention. Carter glanced at the clock, and then at the small stack of sleeves. "We will need a runner and a witness," she said. We will need a cabinet, a log, and a key, written and signed. She looked at Blake without flinching. We will formalize this before anyone calls the pages stories. Blake waved a hand, as if clearing dust. Formalize whatever comforts you, he said. Then to the camera, warmth restored, the good captain on a calm deck. The point is that we iterate quickly and responsibly under pressure. The Toyota chief looked at him, and for a moment, Blake was a man who had been asked a question he had not prepared to answer. The chief said nothing. He looked back to Maya and waited. The printer clicked to its own patience and fed another page. Carter wrote the hour in letters without glancing down. Muscle memory. Guiding the pen to the corner, she sealed the sleeve, squared the edges of the stack, and tapped the top with her knuckle, a soft metronome that kept the room in time. Maya pressed her fingers into the backpack strap and felt the steadiness return. The long room breathed at her back. The glass, the helicopter circle, the hush that swelled with each small proof and thinned with each breath. Near her shoulder, Rosa stood warm in the conditioned air, the lemon of her apron lifting through the clean, metallic smell of effort. Blake's display glowed. Veins and capillaries of systems he called his. He spread his hands as if he had unveiled a painting, and now expected reverence. Let us hold here a moment more, Carter said, not asking. The interface pane blinked, a small square of truth on a wall of statements. Maya pointed to a line 3 entries down, another hinge small enough to miss and heavy enough to carry a door. This one tells, she said. It should ask. Carter corrected it. The chart answered with the contented shift of an animal settling after a good scratch. The green deepened. The floor hums sank to that particular pitch that makes the discs sound asleep and sure. Carter printed again, drew the red ring, wrote the hour in letters. Signed. Sealed. She placed the envelope on the stack and squared the corners, then wrote a number on a separate sheet and crossed it out and wrote the number in words instead. She tapped once more, confirming the count, the way a person checks a pulse. Rosa's eyes brightened and held. She blinked a single time. Her voice reached Maya in a whisper so light it felt like a hand passed beneath a door. I am proud, she said. Maya nodded. Steady. We are not done. The river of comments went on. Outside, the sirens braided with the city's baseline. The helicopter carved its patient circle. Light slid across the table and climbed the aluminum and spilled to Maya's wrist like something living that meant no harm. Blake cleared his throat into the microphone. The tour, he said, and the smile he found for the camera was careful and thin. The Toyota chief did not look away from Maya. The BMW director set his pen down and let it rest. The Ford representative placed his phone face down as if excusing it from duty. Carter capped the red marker, then uncapped it again to add a final line along the bottom of the top page. Letters clean and unhurried. Questions corrected, not answers forced. Maya took in the room, the scent of lemon and warmed metal and printer ink, the hush that respected proof, the fact of green. She returned her eyes to the code, to the neat place where a wrong word had been replaced by the right question. She let her breath move with the machine. How many more? The BMW director asked again, gentle as before, not a demand now, an invitation. Maya did not look up. Enough to matter, she said. The printer warmed, accepting the verdict. The sleeves lay aligned, calm and ready to be counted by hands that know how to count without losing the meaning of what is being kept. And beyond the glass, the day held its breath and waited to see if the room would learn how to ask. Green held its quiet like a promise, and the room pretended that meant the storm had passed. Harrison Blake faced the rolling display and softened his voice into the tone he used for launches and interviews, the one that polished trouble until it looked like momentum. He called the next segment a guided tour. He called the panes a journey. He called the tangle on the glass a vision. Maya kept listening to the machines. The hum beneath the floor had settled into that sure sleeping pitch, the one that meant the system was no longer fighting itself. She matched her breath to it. The aluminum edge of the laptop rested cool against her wrist, a bar of quiet she could lean on. Dr. Sarah Carter stood at her side with eyes on the interface pane, not the theater at center stage. On the table, the clear sleeves lay stacked and square, catching light like still water, each page ringed in red and signed with the hour in careful words. Blake paced. One hand floated toward the map while the other straightened his tie, as if the fabric knew how to comfort him. "We begin here," he said, tapping a bright node that fed others. He spoke of orchestration and harmony, of throughput and trust. While he walked the room with syllables, his assistant eased the stream panel lower, quieting the river of comments, as if pulling a door almost shut. The director from the car maker in Munich watched Maya instead of the display. The chief from the maker in Tokyo watched the sleeves. The representative from the maker in Detroit kept his phone face down, excused from duty. Rosa stood fully on the carpet now, hands empty, apron smooth, the lemon scent near her shoulder, bright against the cold air. Maya let Blake's language pass like weather along glass. She kept her eyes where the questions lived. Lines of interface calls blinked with the patience of a metronome. She felt for the next hinge, that small catch where a sentence told when it should ask. It announced itself not with theory first, but with feel, the way a hallway tells a corner to a child who has walked it in the dark. "Dr. Carter," Maya said softly, "may we open the traffic pane beside the navigation pane?" Carter split the view. The laptop fan breathed warmer across Maya's wrist. She dimmed the brightness a fraction so the letters sharpened. Maya traced above the glass with a small, precise motion, as if drawing a path she could almost see. "Here," Maya said, "you tell the light to change. You should ask whether changing keeps the street safe." Carter's fingers moved with a tailor's calm, lifting a tiny symbol and setting another in its place. The careful turn that sets a frame straight. She pressed the key that makes a thought become action. On the second panel, the red fray at the edge tightened, softened, and slid into green, like a busy intersection that had finally learned to listen before it spoke. A pocket of sound opened near the investor row. The soft rustle of coats. The small intake people try to hide in public room. The assistant glanced at Blake, who did not turn. His tour continued. Words walking the glass, hand finding the knot of his tie again and again. As if a ritual could hold the floor steady. Carter printed. Warm air lifted from the tray. She wrote the hour along the corner in letters, circled the shift, and added a short line with the tidy certainty of a witness. Traffic mirror improved. Interface asks applied. She slid the page into a fresh sleeve, pressed the seam with the heel of her hand, and set it atop the stack. A knuckle tapped the corner. A soft count. Blake changed slides on the big display. He never looked at the evidence. He did not name the pages. He spoke of the dignity of models and of the dangers of naive edits, and his voice picked up honey at the edges, as if sweetness could make the room accept the weight of his certainty. Maya watched another corner of the list flicker in that way that meant a conversation had been treated like a command. She lifted a finger without letting it touch the glass. "Dr. Carter, may I show the question in the part that speaks to the bus route verification?" Carter nodded once, already moving the cursor. Maya pointed with the same crisp care. "This tells the bus to hold. It should ask whether the hold is needed given a late arrival." Carter made the adjustment. The chart to the right answered like a tired animal finally finding a bed made for it. Green deepened until the room could feel it in the grain of the table. The hum below sank one small notch and held. The representative from Detroit parted his mouth, then shut it, then looked at Blake, then away. The director from Munich rested his pen and did not pick it up again. The chief from Tokyo slid a glance to Rosa and back to Maya, as if measuring the distance between a mother's quiet and a child's calm. Even with the volume set lower, the stream kept moving, a sea under a wind. Teach the room how to ask. The line returned, steady rather than loud. Another message, named the red rings, and the hour in word. Another said that questions were winning over titles. Blake stopped at the carpet's edge and smiled without teeth. We appreciate the enthusiasm of younger visitors. He told the camera, real advances arise from structure and discipline, not from parlor tricks. Carter slid the new page into its sleeve and signed the plastic in red. The marker made a soft sealing sound. She did not look up. Maya did not answer Blake. She kept her attention pinned to the work, to the clean satisfaction of cause and proof. A new toque found here, a thread tucked under a drawer's lip. She followed it with her eyes. Hospital mirror was not in live from this floor. Yet it continued to tell and tell. The test gate waited like a prudent door. May we mirror the hospital pain again? Maya asked. We will not change in live. Carter mirrored. Maya read the line. Then the next. This tells a value to write before the name is checked, she said. It should ask whether the name belongs with the result. Carter changed it in the sandbox only. The test heartbeat held true. When the lab value arrived at the very instant the machine once slipped, Carter exhaled, wrote, stamped, signed, sleeved, and placed the page in a second stack separate from the live corrections. She notched the sleeve's corner with the smallest tear she could feel with a fingertip, a tactile code that would still speak if the lights failed. Blake's smile tightened. He stepped into the glow of the rolling map so that the diagram haloed his shoulders. Now, he said, let us consider the architecture of our encryption layer, a field that demands greater care. He made care sound like a cage and seemed relieved to close it. The director from Munich did not watch the cage. He asked the room in the tone of a professor who remembers being young. How many more questions will this list allow if we keep faith with what we are seeing? Carter glanced at Maya and at the clock and at the sleeves. Enough to fill a cabinet, she said. Enough to require locks and a log and signatures in full names. We will treasure your passion for paperwork, Blake said, soft and cutting. Our customers expect performance, not pageantry. The chief from Tokyo turned his head by a fraction. Performance follows proof, he said, even and calm. The sentence landed, and the room did not breathe for a heartbeat. Maya slid the manual a finger's width and opened to a page whose edge had softened under her thumb across many quiet evenings. Pencil loops there had darkened with the oils of her hand. She laid the book so the chapter's title mirrored the pain's title, and the effect was of two mirrors catching and returning the same room. She traced to a circled line. This one, she told Carter, it is the same mistake, like a note repeated by a player who cannot yet hear the tune. Carter's mouth drew in a way that might have been grief. She fixed the line. The pain answered with a lift, so smooth it felt like agreement. Print, circle, hour in letters, signature, sleeve. Ritual calmed the air like prayer. Rosa moved a half step closer. Her soul's quiet, on danse carpet. She watched Maya's hands, then looked at her own. Skin cracked from winter and detergent, finally resting without work in them. Pride lit her face in a way she tried to hide and could not. Blake drew himself taller, a man attempting to reshape a story with posture when words fail. He turned from the map to the table and found the top envelope with his eyes. He did not touch it. His smile cooled. "We will now return to the tour," he said. "There are parts of the system well beyond the grasp of minor adjustments. There are layers built by experts with years of formal training." The sentence wore a suit and carried a knife beneath the lapel. The room heard the blade. The engineers who had heard it before kept their faces smooth. Maya did not rise to the slight. She examined the list and felt for another catch. That place where a machine had been told for so long it had forgotten how to ask. She lifted her finger again. "Emergency lane priority," she said. It should ask whether the route is already occupied." Carter corrected it. The pane trembled and then quieted, as if a siren had been given a corridor without shouting. The page warmed into her hand. The red ring closed. The hour in letters took its place. The sleeve whispered shut. The stack squared with a tap. The room exhaled. Overhead, the helicopter curved through another patient circle. The glass answered with a small shiver, a heartbeat that belonged to stone. Blake's assistant leaned close and whispered tight and fast. Blake nodded a bare degree and lifted his face to the camera, sincerity flooding like stage light. "Friends," he said, "you can see that our systems are resilient under pressure and that our team meets any challenge in real time. As always, we will move with care." Carter capped the red marker and set it down, then reopened it as if memory had tugged her sleeve, and wrote a clean line along the bottom of the top page. "Question corrected, not answers forced." Her handwriting looked like a straight path across a winter field. Maya let her eyes rise from the panes to the faces to the sleeves and finally to Rosa. The lemon lifted something tight in her chest. Each quiet beat after each fix now felt like an agreement between the room and the machines, a truce that held as long as they honored it. The director from Munich leaned forward on his forearms. The angle made him look less like a buyer and more like a person who had written code alone at night. He spoke without looking at Blake. "When did you first notice?" he asked. "Not the line we changed, but the idea behind it." Maya glanced at the manual and then at the glass. "I learned to hear the difference," she said, "between telling and asking. The machine answered when I asked." Blake clapped once. The sound neat and dry. "Charming," he said. The room declined to echo him. The chief from Tokyo looked toward Carter. "How many sleeves before you consider this a formal pattern?" he asked. Carter set a palm on the stack, then lifted it away. "We have crossed that line," she said. "The pattern is established. The dates are marked. The names are signed." She turned to Maya with a gravity she would use for a colleague. "Your notes align with the failures we can prove. Your pencil marks matched the lines before we knew them." Rosa pulled in a breath and set down a weight only she could feel. She touched the manual's edge with one fingertip and let her hand rest there. A small blessing. The stream, though dimmed, went on. Lines appeared, vanished, returned. The same sentence threaded through like a theme. "Teach the room how to ask." Blake straightened his cuffs with careful precision. "Enough," he said, the word oiled to glide. "We resume the planned sequence. The child has had her minute." Maya felt the word brush her skin and roll away like water off a waxed leaf. She turned back to the pane. The next hinge waited. The hum kept its note. Light crept across the table and climbed the sleeve edges like a tide. "Dr. Carter," she said, "one more. The path solver that hands to station stops. It may ask instead." Carter adjusted. The lines steadied. The chart lifted. The paper warmed. Red closed its ring. The hour in letters found its corner. The signature curved along the edge. The sleeve took the sheet and whispered shut. Maya breathed with the machine, and the room followed a beat later. Blake held the smiling mask for one more heartbeat and set it back over the man beneath. The eyes beneath asked whether a mask can still work. When a room watches the work instead of the show, the director from Munich asked again. Jentler now, not a demand, but an invitation. How many more? Maya did not look up. Enough to matter, she said. Blake opened his mouth and closed it. The helicopter circled. The glass answered. The sleeves waited square and clear and undeniable. And the tour that had promised to lead the room away from the work bent back toward the only thing that kept the green honest, the small questions that turned telling into asking and asking into proof. Green held like a steady breath across glass, and the hush that follows proof settled over the room with the weight of a blanket. The rolling map still glowed behind Harrison Blake, lines and nodes drawn like a constellation he wanted the world to admire. He stepped into that halo and made himself taller, the showman returning to his face as if it had never left. Enough, he said, velvet laid over steel. We have indulged the moment, now we return to discipline. His assistant rolled in a second display, slimmer and darker, its narrow frame catching the ceiling light. Cables clicked into place. A tiny lamp winked awake. The screen opened to a black field that felt like the inside of a held breath. Maya kept listening to the machines instead of the man. The hum beneath the floor held to that low, sleeping pitch, the one that meant the system had stopped fighting itself. She matched her breath to it and kept her hand above the keys without touching. The cool, aluminum edge, a quiet anchor along her wrist. Dr. Sarah Carter stood close, eyes fixed on the interface pane, one palm resting on the stack of clear sleeves, as if the weight of paper could hold the table steady. Rosa stayed within the carpet line, fingers laced, the lemon trace at her shoulder calm against the chilled air. Blake faced the camera with a smile built for storms. "Friends," he said to the unseen tide beyond the glass, "we will resolve this with clarity." He turned to Maya the way a man looks at a nail he intends to bend back straight. "You claim to see patterns our finest minds have missed. Let us make it simple." He nodded once. The dark screen bloomed into a white ring, a clean circle, with a small point at its heart. No digits, no hands, just the shape of time waiting to move. 24 hours, Blake said, placing each word like a chess piece. From now, every error our systems conceal, every miscommunication between modules, every weak seam, find them. Prove repeatable improvement. Preserve evidence with witnesses. If you do, I will write a check for $100 million in public. Here, on camera. He let the smile take its time. If you fail, you and your mother will leave this building and will not return. We will correct the record for those watching. A lucky minute does not make a career. The room drew in a breath and did not let it out. The helicopter passed, and the window gave a small tremor that vibrated into everyone's shoes. Somewhere along the wall, a live counter ran on. But Maya did not look there. She felt the weather of the moment without needing to read it. Carter checked the clock on the wall and the ring on the screen, and spoke with the deliberate calm of a person for whom procedure is a shelter. "Any timed evaluation requires term," she said. "Scope and proof, standard and preservation and custody, and stop rules. Without that, it is theater and not test." Blake's smile sharpened like glass. "By all means," he said. "Write the list." He spread a hand to the camera as if to include it in his good manners. "We will be transparent. We always are." The director from Munich leaned in with forearms placed lightly on the polished wood. His tone was nearly casual, but the sentence had the weight of brass. "If this proceeds," he said, "we will require a neutral witness for rules and evidence." He looked to Carter rather than Blake. "We prefer your standard." The chief from Tokyo inclined his head a small degree. "Performance follows proof," he said, and the echo of it cut a clean path through the heat of the room. Rosa's fingers tightened and loosened, small crescents of white showing and fading along her knuckles. Maya felt the motion without turning. The lemon scent steadied her like a hand laid gently on the shoulder. She looked at the white ring, pure and patient, and checked the hum again. Still low, still green. The machine was not afraid. "Start it," Blake said. The ring, filled by a thin slice and a timestamp, blinked at the bottom corner in words. Carter read the hour out loud like a witness line, then wrote it along the top page in careful letters, then signed, then pressed the cap on the marker and pressed it off again. "Cabinet," she said to the nearest engineer. "Lock and seals and logbook." Now, the engineer rose as if from a shallow sleep and left without sound. The door caught softly behind him. Blake moved back to the middle like a man reclaiming a stage. "We will provide read access across the relevant panes," he said, voice gliding. "No production rights without authorization. You will be escorted. You will not touch what you have not asked for." His smile tilted at one corner, asking, "I hear, is your strength?" Maya held her palm above the glass and did not answer him. She looked to Carter. "May we continue?" she asked. Carter nodded once. A small green light. She split the screen. Navigation blinked beside traffic. The bus gate sat ready. The hospital mirror slept behind a sandbox tag. The cursor waited in its quiet blink. Maya traced in the air, the motion exact as a compass point. "Here," she said. "This tells the path solver to force a merge. It should ask whether a merge is safest, given new variants." Carter replaced a mark with surgeon's steadiness and pressed enter. The side panel smoothed from jitter into calm climb. Print, circle, hour in letters, signature, sleeve. The plastic made that clean whisper when it sealed. Carter tapped the corner once. "Count, 1 page more," and one step nearer to proof that did not need permission. The assistant bent and spoke into Blake's shoulder. A quick murmur meant for no microphone. Blake did not move. His eyes watched the white ring begin its patient walk. Rosa drifted a half step nearer, not crossing the table line, just enough to see the tidy handwriting along the sleeves. She read the titles under her breath, the way a parent reads a list before bed. Hour in letters. Witnessed. Interface asks applied. The words fit her mouth with a quiet pride that refused to be hidden. The representative from Detroit flipped his phone face up and let it sleep there. He studied the stacked sleeves, as if they were the first voices in a meeting he would later have to explain. The director from Munich drew his pen down the edge of his notebook without writing. The chief from Tokyo folded his hands and did not hurry. Blake kept the mask on. "I assume," he said to the air and the cameras, and finally to Maya, "that you accept." Maya did not look up from the pane. "We accept that questions are faster than commands," she said. "If your wager requires us to ask until the machine answers, yes." Carter's mouth made a small shape that was not quite a smile, and was exactly approval. The engineer returned, pushing a steel cabinet on a dolly. Its door opened to clean shelves, the interior bare as a grid. He set the brakes. Another engineer followed with a box of tamper seals and a thick logbook striped with headings like a ruled field. Carter lifted the book, tested the weight, and set it open. She wrote the date in words. She wrote the hour in words. She wrote the location in words. She signed her name, and then looked to the men from Munich and Tokyo. "Gentlemen," she said, "if you would witness." They came forward without theater, and each wrote his name in clean letters. Each wrote the hour. Each made a small mark beside the seal numbers as Carter read them out. The sound of marker on plastic was a fine hiss, and the sound of a stamp on paper was a soft, decisive thunk. The room heard those small sounds and believed them. The white ring advanced another slice. Time looked like a slow dawn. Maya pointed to the next hinge. This tells, she said. It must ask. Carter moved, corrected, entered, printed, circled, wrote, signed, sealed, stacked. The rhythm took hold like a metronome under a player's hands. Blake turned to the camera with the voice of a host who has learned to survive weather. "You are seeing a company adapt in real time," he said. "Our openness is unmatched." His eyes warmed because they had to. Across the wall, the stream still moved in a quiet sea. "Teach the room how to ask." A line repeated, steady, not loud. Another message named the wager and wrote that the hour had been spoken and signed. The river did not rage. It held. Rosa touched the top sleeve with one fingertip and drew her hand back, leaving no smudge, only the private sense of a blessing. The lemon in the air called up stairwell afternoons, the glow on concrete when a floor was finished, and a girl sat with pencil and paper and listened to machines sing. Carter set the first stack into the cabinet, titles visible along the spines of plastic. She spoke each page as it went down, and the engineer with the log wrote each title in neat lines. When the shelf held full, she closed the door, pressed a seal across the seam, read the number, and wrote it in words. Her hand did not shake. Maya kept going. The pain was generous. Another small hinge, another clean question, another lift. The room did not cheer. It learned how to breathe in the beat between correction and green, the way people breathe for a patient finally sleeping after long fever. Half the ring, and still they worked. Blake's smile cooled by a degree. He returned to the rolling map and lifted a palm toward a dense thicket of lines, the place where everything gathered like a harbor, the encryption interface that protects financial rails, he said, trimming each syllable. He faced the table rather than the camera. "This is not a toy. This will not move for word games." Carter kept her eyes on the pane and answered as she would to a colleague. "We are not altering the cryptographic core," she said. "We are changing the sentence that asks it for help." Maya slid the manual near the laptop and opened to a page made velvet by her thumb. She laid a finger flat along a circled line. "Here," she said. "The interface layer tells the key when to rotate. It should ask whether rotation is necessary given the verification state." Carter traced from manual to pane and back. She replaced a single symbol, a mark so small it looked like nothing, until you felt the machine inhale. "Enter." The performance bar for the interface lifted like a reluctant animal discovering it can still run. The security indicator held steady, a constant green. The side panel recorded a measurable rise, not a show, not a trick, a change that could be counted and kept. Blake's breath caught and flattened. He did not speak to the camera this time. He addressed the room, because the room refused to be a stage. "Even if that holds," he began, "the risk profile of live deployment, sandbox only," Carter said, and printed before he finished. She wrote the hour in letters, and signed the edge, and sealed the page into the second stack with a small tear notch along the sleeve. She set it on a separate shelf in the cabinet and read the seal words out. The engineer wrote them line by line and framed them with a square drawn neat around the digits, written as letters, a small frame around a small truth. The ring on the clock took another bite of black. The director from Munich leaned back and folded his hands. The chief from Tokyo watched Maya's finger more than the code now, as if the movement itself were a language. The representative from Detroit let out a long breath and did not lift the phone. Rosa exhaled and smiled without teeth, the kind of warmth that belongs to a winter kitchen. Maya did not look up to see it. She felt it through the air and stored it like heat behind a door. Blake reached for his safest word. "Process." He held it up as if it were a harbor wall. He spoke of review and oversight, of gates and governance, and sign off. He did not say fear. He did not say pride. He did not admit that the cloth of the room had taken the shape of a child's calm, and that he was now the one standing at the edge of the table. Maya pointed again. This tells, it should ask, enter, smooth, print, circle, hour in letters, signature, sleeve, tap, count, cabinet, seal, read, log. The ritual gave the room its time signature and carried it forward, 3/4 of the ring, and still the hum held. Blake looked at the circle and at Maya, and for a heartbeat let the mask slip. The man underneath looked back at the stack of sleeves and at the steel door, at the quiet space above the keyboard, where questions live. He gathered the mask again and fastened it with a breath. Let the record reflect, he said, that we welcomed the challenge, that we invited proof, that we kept our word. Carter capped the red marker and let it rest, then took it up again and wrote along the bottom edge of the newest page the line she had written before and would write again. Question corrected, not answers forced. She set down the marker and looked at Maya with the kind of pride a person saves for the day a colleague arrives. Rosa loosened her fingers and let her hands fall open. She did not wipe her eyes. She kept them clear. Maya breathed with the machine. The hum stayed low. The white ring kept moving toward whole. The sleeves kept their square. The cabinet took the weight and did not complain. The city beyond the glass circled itself with sirens and light, and the slow, patient wing of helicopters. Blake opened his mouth and then paused. He was not looking at the camera or at the map. He was looking at the pages in their skins, and at the lock with its neat seal, and at the little space above the keys where a child's hand did not touch. He closed his mouth and opened it again. We proceed, he said, and the line wavered and then straightened. We proceed. The white ring on the dark screen crept forward like a moon, taking patient bites out of night. One pale slice, then another, and the room learned the sound of night even before the windows admitted it. The hum under the floor held steady at that low, sure pitch that meant the machines were no longer fighting themselves. Printers breathed in gentle bursts. The air system stitched a thin thread through the vents. People stopped trying to speak over the machines and instead matched their breaths to them, as if the room had chosen a metronome and everyone agreed to keep time. Dr. Sarah Carter set the pace. She stood to Maya's right, eyes pinned to the interface pane, one hand flat on the stack of clear sleeves, as though the weight of proof could anchor the table. With her other hand, she sent runners in quiet circuits, the choreography of a scrub nurse who knows how to keep a theater honest. Cabinet, seals, log, witness, she said, and the words moved the room without needing to be repeated. The director from Munich and the chief from Tokyo swapped pens with unhurried grace, adding signatures where they belonged. The representative from the maker in Detroit kept his phone face down and began to look as if that had always been his habit. Harrison Blake did not dismiss the showman inside him. He hovered at the edges of the rolling map and addressed the camera with a voice that treated stress like a stage, smoothing every bump into the promise of leadership. We adapt in real time, he said. We welcome proof. We move with care. When his eyes slid toward Maya, the lines put on a shadow they had not rehearsed. Maya did not look back. She lived 20 inches from the glass. The aluminum edge of the laptop made a cool bar along her wrist, the small comfort a weathered railing can give on a long stare. She kept her hand above the keys instead of on them, and felt for the next wrong sentence, the way a child learns corners in a dark hallway. Tell, not ask, again and again. She pointed with a small, exact motion. Dr. Carter changed one mark, nothing more than a breath, and press the key that tells a machine to accept sense. The graph shuddered, then smoothed. Red thinned, green rose in a measured climb. Print, circle, write the hour in words. Sign, seal, tap, cabinet, log. The room took the rhythm into its bones. The first hour of night did not feel like a test as much as a deciding. Maya named the pattern, so Carter's notes could carry it beyond memory. Instruction used where inquiry required. The phrase felt too plain for the lift it delivered, which was exactly why it worked. Carter started a short list on a fresh page with the red marker. A taxonomy by feel more than theory. Interface to path solver. Interface to gate timing. Interface to bus priority. Interface to hospital mirror. Sandbox only. She slid the sheet into its own sleeve, wrote the hour in words, and added a small neat line at the bottom that read living document. Outside the glass, the city tilted toward evening and then into night. The helicopter's patient circles gave the sky back to patient aircraft. Towers across the avenue stepped their lights down in polite tears. Inside, the brightness stayed honest and turned a little cooler around the white clock face. The stream along the wall, dimmed by the assistant's caution, still moved with the persistence of tide. Teach the room how to ask. Returned again and again. A refrain the room could feel without reading. By the time the second hour had stitched itself closed, the map of what to do had a steady shape. Maya did not try to read everything. She walked the list of interfaces the way Rosa once taught her to walk a wet floor. Two first, heel down, sense the slick places before you trust them. Hinge here, she said. Carter moved and made the smallest good change. Enter. Smooth. Print. Circle. Write. Sign. Seal. Tap. The sleeves stood in their clear skins like quiet lanterns. The steel cabinet opened and accepted their weight, and the logbook caught each page with date and hour and seal number written in words. The soft, decisive thunk of a stamp gave the room a spine. Blake tried for a change in weather. He stepped near enough that his smile felt like a hand placed on a shoulder, and spoke in the register reserved for concern. "This is serious work," he murmured, just loud enough for a microphone to pretend nothing had been staged. "It is not a game of find and replace." Maya watched the cursor blink, a small lighthouse that kept its own counsel. "I know," she said without moving her eyes. "It is language." The smile cooled. He turned to the camera and clothed himself in the oath of safety. "Our commitment is absolute," he said, and for a moment the sentence rang as if it had been cut from iron. Stacks became towers before anyone marked that they had grown. The first shelf of the cabinet closed beneath a clean seal. Carter read the numbers in a clear voice. The director from Munich echoed them with his own cadence. The chief from Tokyo wrote them in a small, neat hand. The representative from Detroit stood and rolled his shoulders once, as if another day had climbed onto his back and needed arranging. Maya asked the path solver to ask. She asked the merge logic to ask. She asked the intersection to ask. She asked the bus gate to ask. She asked the hospital mirror, still in the sandbox, where it could do no harm, to ask. With each correction came a quiet pleasure that had nothing to do with winning an argument and everything to do with a simple thing, doing the right thing because you addressed it the right way. Fatigue drew its small lines and the cameras kept them. Carter slid the brightness down a notch to save eyes. A runner set water near the sleeves the way a nurse places a cup where it can be reached without tugging a line. Rosa folded a sandwich in wax paper and set it at the corner of the table. "Eat," she said. "In a minute," Maya answered, eyes on the pane. Rosa touched the manual's edge with 2 fingers and withdrew. Carter nudged the sandwich closer with the marker cap. The lemon on Rosa's apron braided with the crisp of paper and the faint metallic clean of a fan. Maya took one bite and set the rest where her hand could find it without thinking. The mustard tasted like something a careful person had made rather than bought. Blake drifted back into her periphery and rested a caution on the air. Tired minds make mistakes, he said, a teacher's rule disguised as care. Real systems do not forgive them. Real systems are breaking on the wrong word, Carter said without looking up. We are forgiving them with questions. The next hinge hid in a corner no one expected. The trading scheduler spoke to a verification gateway with a sentence that told instead of asked, and under load. The gateway stumbled, then caught, then stumbled again. One mark, set right. Enter. The stagger vanished. Not spectacle, not miracle. Correction. Measured. Graphable. Repeatable. Sealable. The assistant whispered to Blake and looked briefly, as if a quiet hand had settled on his back. Blake rolled the knot of his tie between finger and thumb. He faced the camera and guided an audience through invisible turbulence. You are seeing adaptation, he said. You are seeing a culture grow. He did not say that none of it had begun until a child reminded the room what a question was for. Night deepened and pressed its palm against the glass. The outside city turned into reflections of this one. The room made its own weather. Sound found a cadence that needed no score. A key pressed, paper breathed, a marker hissed, a seal licked metal, a stamp landed, a knuckle tapped once to count. The stream refused to sleep. Teach the room how to ask braided with short messages from far rooms where other machines hummed and other eyes had learned how to keep faith with a line. Rosa paced between cabinet and table, a quiet sentinel. She watched the hover of Maya's fingers, the small tilt of Maya's head that meant a hinge had revealed itself. She watched the breath Carter took before she pressed enter. A small act of care you could see only from close enough to hear the fan. Blake began choosing lanes with intent. He steered the map toward dense places, toward timing that punished clumsy hands, toward the interfaces that touched his pride. Encryption again, he said, mild, as a gracious host. Traffic arbitration under emergency load, he added. A maître with specials, hospital mirror, sandbox only, he warned, a parent drawing a boundary and pretending not to be watched. Sandbox is sufficient, Carter said. Print, circle, write, sign, seal, log. The hospital mirror held a heart line steady. When a lab value arrived under a new name, Rosa set the sleeve in the cabinet with both hands, slow and precise, as if placing a fragile thing in cold storage. Blake tried talk in place of map. He faced the lens and let his hands move between open and closed while he spoke the language of leadership. Review. Leçon. Humility before complexity. The words sounded like an apology drafted for a day he did not believe would come. The room did not sign it. Maya kept asking things to ask. Carter kept the ritual supple, so it would not harden into religion. The director from Munich began to watch the movement of Maya's finger rather than the cursor itself. The chief from Tokyo slid his small book away and simply looked, hands folded, a decision warming in his eyes. Another shelf filled. Carter shifted the cabinet 2 inches so the hinge would not kiss the leg of the table. The engineer writing the log switched hands, and the letters did not suffer. Maya named each hinge aloud. Carter gave each a line and a circle, and a signature, and a seal. The cabinet took the weight and said nothing. Blake pressed nearer and tried intimacy pitched as policy. There is a reason, he said, that we ask adults to do hard things at hard hours. Adults wrote the wrong word, Maya said. Not unkind. I am asking them to write the right one. He stayed for one heartbeat as if searching for another angle in the glass, then returned to a distance where the smile could live. A thin warning trembled somewhere in the ceiling, a breaker that thought about yielding and chose not to. The tone of the room shifted half a step, then returned. The assistant looked upward as if listening for rain. The engineer at the log paused to listen and resume. Carter touched the manual, then the laptop, then the cabinet seals, then the marker, and nodded to no one at all, us if counting lifelines. A printer hiccuped, and then fed a page with the satisfaction of a throat cleared. Live systems are delicate, Blake said, turning the tremor into doctrine. One mistake at this hour can undo a year. One word has been undoing years, Carter answered, and wrote the hour with a steady hand. We are putting the word back where it belongs. Quiet beats came and went like tide. In one, Rosa shut her eyes for 3 careful breaths, and opened them with the same calm. In another, the director from Munich rolled his neck and smiled at the ache that arrives when truth finally lands. In another, the chief from Tokyo murmured to Carter that policy must be drafted while the proof was still warm, and Carter nodded like a person who can hold heat and hold a pen at once. Blake returned to his safest harbor and braced his hands on the word process, as if the word could keep him upright. Review, oversight, governance, he said. He kept his posture and his tone, and for the camera, it was enough to look like a captain holding a wheel. But when he glanced at the sealed cabinet and the square stack and the little space above the keys where a child's hand did not touch, something in his face learned a new shape and tried to forget it had. Rosa leaned close enough that her whisper did not have to travel. Proud, she said. Maya blinked once. We are not done, she said, and it did not sound like pride. It sounded like a clock. The white ring moved on at its calm, punishing speed. The hum held, the sleeves kept their square, the cabinet kept its seal. The city outside circled itself with sirens and pinpricks of light. Blake faced the lens and said, "We proceed," because saying it made him feel like he was leading the motion. The room had already moved. The white ring kept eating the dark with calm patience, until every chest in the room learned to pace itself to that quiet, devouring. The hum under the floor stayed low and sure, steady as a sleeper who has finally settled. The air system stitched a thin thread through the vents. Printers breathed, pens uncapped and capped. The ritual held like a measured prayer that did not waste a word. Dr. Sarah Carter refused to let the line slacken. She stood at Maya's right, with her palm on the square stack of sleeves, as if proof itself had weight. With her other hand she moved runners with the economy of a scrub nurse, calling cabinet and seals and log and witness in a cadence that made the room behave. The director from Munich and the chief from Tokyo took turns at the witness lines, each signature neat, each hour written out in letters. The representative from Detroit watched the steel cabinet the way a careful man watches a vault that is finally being used for its real purpose. Harrison Blake drifted between the rolling map and the lens, a tide that would not recede. His voice kept the practiced temperature of calm leadership. We adapt. We welcome proof. We move with care. When his eyes slid to Maya, the calm thinned by a shade. Maya lived 20 inches from the glass. She matched the machine's low note with her breath, and kept her hand above the keys, not touching, as if the small distance were the place where questions learned to breathe. She felt the old wrong shape wearing new hats. Tell, not ask. Here, she said, and Carter made a change so small it was almost only a thought. Enter. The graph shed its tremor and lifted. Print. Circle. Write the hour in words. Sign. Seal. Tap. Cabinet. Log. Between each step, a beat of silence that felt like respect. The room had learned the pace of a long run. Now the course tilted. A runner brought a slip from operations 3 floors down, its tone trying not to be a warning. External watchers request a system-wide pause for risk review. Carter read once, slid a blank page over the slip, wrote the hour in letters across the top, then tucked the slip beneath the plastic, as if to keep its heat off the table. She looked at Blake with the unchanged calm she uses for stubborn code. "We have a test proceeding with custody in place," she said. "Any pause must be written with witnesses and reasons. Otherwise, the record will look like fear." Blake smiled as if fear were a rumor. "We respect process," he said, and rested the smile on the word, until it became furniture again. His assistant nodded, as if furniture could be a promise. The slip stayed sealed under clear skin. Maya did not look up. She followed a flicker, where traffic arbitration spoke to a spillover buffer, with the certainty of a boss, and not the humility of a partner. "Here," she said, "ask the buffer whether it is actually full before you tell it to spill." Carter lifted one sign and set another in its place, pressed enter, and the side panel steadied like water that had stopped trying to climb a wall. Carter printed and circled and wrote the hour in words and signed and sealed. The cabinet took the page and kept its even breath. The director from Munich leaned toward the table without standing. He spoke with the weary intimacy of someone who has broken his own builds at unkind hours. "Your ritual is the only reason any of this will hold by morning," he said. "Carter, tilted her hill," a gesture that meant agreement, and also meant keep going. Fatigue drew deeper lines, and the cameras kept them. A technician swapped a toner with the reverence reserved for small bones. A runner set earthen mugs of coffee beside paper cups of water, steam cutting a darker note through the chilled air. Rosa placed a fresh sandwich near the softened manual. "Eat," she whispered. Maya took a bite without looking, and set the rest where her hand could find it without thinking. Mustard, quiet bread. The lemon on Rosa's apron made a small summer beneath the vents. Blake tried a new key. He stepped close enough that his voice could pretend to be care. "One mistake at this hour can undo a year," he murmured, soft enough to be human and loud enough to be heard. "One wrong word has been undoing years." Carter answered without lifting her eyes, and wrote the hour in letters with the steadiness of someone who knows why she is awake. Small truths arrived like coins, a limiter frightened by a misread condition, a scheduler that ordered instead of inquired during surge. Each time the smallest turn, each time a steadier chart, each time paper warming into a sleeve while the red ring closed, and the stamp landed with a soft final sound. The cabinet grew heavier, one quiet inch at a time. Then the fault line moved. Maya's finger hovered above a maintenance block she had passed twice because it wore the anonymous name of chores. The scroll paused over an interface that cleaned stale sessions in Hospital Mirror, and also, almost as an afterthought, checked identity caches against a shadow table. The thought presented itself the way a door drafts when not latched in a storm. Maya did not touch the glass. "Dr. Carter," she said softly, "please split and mirror this pane in sandbox." Carter cloned with practiced speed. Maya leaned into that little space where dangerous questions are safe. "This line tells the system to refresh identity before it checks whether the identity belongs with the data," Maya said. "It must ask whether the identity belongs before it refreshes, or a bad name can be washed clean while it holds a result." The room kept still. Carter made the smallest correction and pressed enter. The test harness ran a case that should never be run live, and now could be safe behind glass. The chart blipped, then settled into a straight truth that felt like apology and warning at once. Carter printed before anyone spoke. She circled. She wrote the hour in letters. She signed. She sealed. She placed the page in the sandbox stack and tore a small notch in the sleeve corner, then set the stack on a separate shelf. She read the seal words aloud, and the engineer wrote them slowly, as if each letter were a step on ice. The chief from Tokyo looked at Blake without moving his head. "Hospital mirror must be audited by morning," he said, silk wrapped around certainty. "We will convene a review," Blake replied, a politician's coat over his voice. He faced the lens. "We have nothing to hide." Maya had not stopped reading. The cousin line appeared in a pane that pretended to be about logs. "Tell this. Do that." Copied once and dressed in a new label. She felt the grit under clean cloth. "Here also," she said. "Ask before you refresh." Carter altered. "Enter." A kelmograph. A breath that felt like the first honest one in a long time. Print. Circle. Hour in letters. Sign. Seal. The stamp sounded like a small gavel in a court that had almost forgotten its benches. The director from Munich set his pen down and spoke to the man from Detroit without looking away from the screen. "This is what I will remember when I am old," he said. "Not the fix, the custody." Blake's assistant touched his shoulder and whispered legal weather. Blake nodded once and found the lens with a gentleman tone. "Our systems will undergo additional protocols tonight," he announced, as if he had conjured them. "Independent review is a pillar of our culture." "Independent review is happening on camera," Carter said mildly, sliding another warm page into clear skin. Quiet beats came and went like tide. A runner moved a dead plant out of the corner, because too many eyes had begun to stare at its hesitant leaves. Rosa lifted a shade 2 inches to let the city's cold glass look in, and lowered it again when a helicopter laid a tired eye of light across the room. The white ring kept its slow, punishing pace. The stream on the wall murmured its refrain, "Teach the room how to ask, around the hour." When kitchens think about bread, the fault line widened. In finance, a reconciliation routine touched a verification cache that thought age made it wise. It told the cache to accept before asking whether acceptance belonged to the batch at hand. Under stress, it behaved like a proud uncle who remembers wrong and has already bought the gift. Carter changed the word "enter." The bar climbed with relief that looked like dignity restored. Print. Circle. Hour in letters. Sign. Seal. The engineer wrote the digits as words and drew a square around them. A fence around a house that had once stood unlocked. The man from Detroit exhaled and pressed thumb and forefinger to the bridge of his nose. A gesture a parent uses when a problem has finally said its name. He did not lift his phone. Rosa placed her hand briefly on the top of the cabinet, as if to feel the temperature of stored truth. Warm, then cool, then simply there. Blake tried to convert the widening fault into a lesson spoken by the conqueror rather than the conquered. Transparency, he told the lens, and process, and courage, and culture. The words became a row of framed papers you pass without reading. The room kept its eyes on the desk. Maya stopped chasing the dense places. The pattern had taught her to hunt edges. Small chores with dangerous cousins. Interfaces that looked like housekeeping and smelled like doors left on the latch. She named the hinge. And Carter moved. And the graph steadied. Paper slid into skin. The red ring closed. The hour in letters found its corner. A signature curved true. A stamp softened the table. A seal read itself aloud, as if proof were a language that needed to hear its own vowels. Then the room learned a new sound. A breaker far above flicked and thought better of it. The air changed pressure for a heartbeat. The lights did not fall. The hum did not drop. Still, every face lifted to the ceiling, as if listening to the thought of a storm. The assistant's lips parted and shut. The engineer at the log paused with his pen above the line. Carter set 2 fingers on the laptop, one on the manual, one on the cabinet door, and breathed. "We continue," she said. "If the lights fail, the paper stays. If the paper burns, the signatures live in the stream." She looked to Munich and Tokyo. "You have photographs." They raised their phones and nodded without ceremony, and the small clicks sounded like locks being thrown on a quiet street. "Live systems are delicate," Blake said, trying to turn tremor into doctrine. "This is why we gate change. We are not changing live," Carter replied, and wrote the hour again. Letters even, line unbroken. "We are changing language. Where it is safe to practice the truth." Maya reached for the next hinge and found instead a sentence she did not want to accept. Deep in the encryption bridge, the ordinary layer asserted state before it verified direction. The same sin in a different church. She showed Carter with the small motion she had used all night. Carter corrected in Sandbox and pressed enter. The bar moved like a drawn bow, finding its arc. Security did not dip. Performance did not leak. Proof laid its hand flat on the table. "We will require a formal letter by morning," the chief from Tokyo said, shoulders settling. "Pattern catalog. Proof artifacts. Custody steps. Scope of risk removed. And a plan to audit every door that looks like housekeeping. You will have it." Carter answered, her pen already writing the header. Pattern catalog. Beneath it, the tidy family of mistakes that had once called themselves complexity and now were named bad manners. Rosa leaned close and let a word carry a blanket with it. "Proud," she whispered. "We are not done," Maya said, and the sentence sounded not like defiance, but like a clock. "That means to finish the hour it has started." The ring kept moving. The seals caught the light. The sleeves stood like panes of a small greenhouse where fragile things could learn to live before they were planted outside. The city wrote itself in the window and erased itself and wrote again. Blake faced the lens and said, "We proceed," because the saying steadied his hand. He turned just enough to take in the cabinet and the living document and the manual with its pencil ghosts and the little space above the keys where a child's hand did not touch. Something in his face learned a new shape and folded it away like a receipt. Maya lifted her finger. "Here." Carter moved. The graph steadied, paper warmed, ink bit, plastic closed. The stamp spoke. The seal read itself. The log took another line, and under it all the hum held, the sound of a fault line settling, not because pressure had vanished, but because the right questions had finally taught the ground how to carry the weight. Morning did not arrive so much as breathe against the glass, turning reflection into fact. The city outside shifted from a ghost of lights to edges and angles, and the room answered with a steadier kind of quiet. The hum below the floor held like a low vow. Printers settled. Marker caps clicked once and rested. The white ring on the wall clock neared its closing arc, a calm halo waiting for ink. Dr. Sarah Carter lifted her palm from the square stack of sleeves, as if testing their temperature. The seals held. The witness log lay open and orderly, its lines a narrow roadway through the night. The director from Munich smoothed a smudge from the bridge of his nose and straightened in his chair. The chief from Tokyo checked the last photographs on his phone and slipped it away, hands folded with the self-possession of someone ready to make silence official. Rosa stood near the steel cabinet, fingers on the cool door, lemon clinging to her like a soft banner of home. She watched her daughter with pride that did not crowd the work. Maya remained where she had lived all night, 20 inches from the glass, wrist against the aluminum edge that was no longer cold. The space above the keys felt like a small porch where questions waited their turn. Lines and nodes still spilled across the big map behind Harrison Blake, a lattice dense enough to pretend it was a city. The air carried a new pressure now, lighter where proof had settled, heavier where story had not yet yielded. Blake drifted between the rolling map and the lens, the old tide trying for shore. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice burnished, "we have demonstrated our culture of improvement." He smiled, the smile he used for morning shows and ribbon cuttings. "This is the transparency that defines us. Reveal first," Carter said, "then culture." The smile struck something that did not break for it. Blake gestured toward the screens with careful neutrality. "Of course, Dr. Carter, proceed." Carter nodded to the assistant. The live panes compressed into a thin band along the bottom, above them a clean field open. She set both hands flat on the table, grounding herself to wood and steel. "Pattern Catalogue," she said, and the heading arrived in crisp letters. Under it, morning began to take its shape. The first slide showed the sentence that had become the night's chorus, telling where asking belonged. On the left, the tangle and scatter of red. On the right, the calm rise of green. Under each, Carter wrote the hour in words, the place in words, the seal in words. She tapped a sleeve, and a small photograph bloomed in the corner. The page, as it had slid into clear skin, she traced the circle around the hinge line with one finger. "A simple correction made measurable," she said, and the camera learned the difference between spectacle and proof. Next came traffic arbitration, the spillover buffer that had been told to choke before it knew it was choking. Before, after, words in letters, signatures in ink, the seal read aloud. The director from Munich made a small sound that could have been a laugh if laughter had belonged here. The chief from Tokyo inclined his head the width of a breath. Carter kept the pace steady. The bus gate that had bowed even when its lane belonged to an ambulance. The merge logic that had commanded rather than asked the path solver. The hospital mirror in Sandbox, where identity had been washed before it had been checked. She slowed there. Not with volume, but with care. "We asked before we refreshed," she said, and the chart answered with that straight truth that felt like warning and apology in one line. "Rosa exhaled," a sound a mother makes when a fever breaks. She did not move forward. She let the work stay at the center. Maya kept her eyes on the pane and heard everything. The rustle of paper, the lift in voices as understanding settled. Her hand hovered above the keys, finger poised over the next hinge, as if listening for breath. The assistant placed a flat silver case on the table beside the softened manual. Carter opened it with the neat attention of a nurse opening a counted tray. Inside lay small drives with tamper seals already set, and a third drive in a clear sleeve with blue tags like slender ribbons. Carter lifted the third, read the seal in words, and wrote the same in the log. She said no digits. Letters shaped time into meaning. "For the record," she said, "all artifacts shown will be exported to sealed media with witnesses and hour in word." She looked to Munich, to Tokyo, to Detroit. Each man gave the nod of someone pressing a thumb to a map. "We are all committed to clarity," Blake said, and almost believed he had led the sentence. Carter returned to the catalog, the proud finance cache that had remembered wrong until the question made it humble. The encryption bridge, where the ordinary layer had asserted before it verified, corrected in Sandbox, where proof could not wound. With each screen, the room learned to read what it had only felt, the small tilt from wrong to right measured in bars and lines, rather than hope or spin. Maya spoke once, voice clean as rain. "The machine answers when you ask it a good question." The line hung in the air, simple and exact, then folded itself back into the work as if it had always been the caption for the night. The camera found hands more than faces. Carter's hand lifting a sleeve, so the seal caught light, the witness pen resting on a margin, ink winking before it slid down a name, Rosa's hand steadying the cabinet door, while Carter placed the new drive on the shelf marked Sandbox in neat letters, Maya's fingers above the keys, that hover that had become the posture of the room. Blake took his step toward the lens again, ready to net the narrative. What you have seen, he said, is leadership, inviting scrutiny and meeting it. He turned to gesture at the map and at a world that might still bear his name if a sentence held long enough. Carter did not cut him. She let the sentence rest, then raised a page not yet shown. The heading sat plain at the top. Doors that look like housekeeping, she read, and the quiet changed shape. The slide settled beside the others. A tidy column of cousins, dragged into light, maintenance blocks with small privileges, log routines with shadow tables, identity refreshes that moved too fast. Each carried its before and after in miniature. Each bore a circle and an hour in letters. Each named its seal and its witness line. It looked like a neighborhood a thief might love, and a parent would memorize. This must go to policy today, the chief from Tokyo said, his dignity plain, audit by design, not by accident, and a letter that names the pattern, so engineers can see themselves when tempted by speed. You will have it by midday, Carter said. The bones of that letter were already gathering in the margins of a clean page. The pen moved like a hand that enjoys honest work. The man from Detroit cleared his throat. When we spec apart, he said, we write a tolerance we can live with. Tell where ask belongs is not a tolerance. It is a failure mode. His eyes stayed on the sleeves. We prefer the version that asks, performance follows proof, said Munich again. And now the words felt less like proverb and more like contract. Blake set both hands on the table as if making a podium. He looked at the sealed cabinet, at the living catalog, at the manual with its pencil ghosts, and drew breath to bind the room to a story he could own. Carter lifted the manual instead, edges swayed soft, where Maya's thumbs had worn them. This book taught the question, she said, placing it down with respect. She set a sealed drive beside it. This holds proof the question worked. She faced the lens. We will deliver both to independent custody when finished. Copies will travel with our witnesses. She did not raise her chin. She did not need to. Maya looked up and met Blake's gaze with frank steadiness. You said one wrong word could undo a year, she said. You were right. She glanced at the screens. We put the word back. The sentence landed like a weight that did not need noise. The stream along the wall kept its tide steady, stitching the moment to a wider fabric with a simple chorus. Teach the room how to ask. The assistant raised a hand and the wall bloomed into two great panes, each split down the middle. Left was before, right was after. Above them, time in words, fixed meaning to measure. Below, a ribbon of photographs showed sleeves with circles and signatures and seals, a lineage the room could swear by. Carter stepped through at a pace that let each change speak for itself. The charts did the talking. The paper did the swearing. The seals did the promising. Rosa pressed her fingers to the cabinet and felt the calm of metal that knows its purpose. She thought of mornings when wet floors drying made long rivers of light, and of nights when fans had sung her child to sleep. She thought of lemon and how its quiet brightness had threaded this hard room without asking permission. Blake lifted his hands, seeking to gather the light through him. This is what leadership looks like, he said, and for a breath the old persuasion rose. Carter, gentle as a teacher who will not scold, placed the last page on the screen. Custody trail, she read. Signatures, hours in letters, titles of artifacts, seal words, witness names in their own hands, a list that could walk into any room and come out the other side intact. The room breathed as if the altitude had corrected. The director from Munich let his shoulders fall, The chief from Tokyo closed his eyes and opened them, a blink that completed a night. The man from Detroit nodded once, the kind of nod a foreman gives when a part seats true. Maya turned to the pane. The white ring on the clock had a sliver left to travel. One more hinge waited, not large enough for a speech, and large enough to count. "Here," she said, and Carter moved with the same steadiness she had carried through the hours. "Enter." The graph smoothed like a shirt laid flat with a hand. Print. Circle. Hour in words. Sign. Seal. Tap. Cabinet. Log. The stamp landed with a small, satisfying sound. A door locking behind the right people. Carter closed the flat case, and the latches caught with a note that felt final without claiming the last word. She set her palm on the case. "Reveal complete," she said. Blake opened his mouth and closed it. The lens had stopped borrowing his light. The screen held circles and arrows and neat handwriting that did not need him. The cabinet stood sealed. The manual breathed pencil ghosts. The little space over the keys waited for a child's hand that hovered instead of clutched. Something changed in his face and folded itself away like a receipt. The clock's ring closed. There was no cheer. There was breath. Carter lifted the witness log and carried it to the men who had watched. Each signed the line for morning. Each wrote the hour in letters. Each pressed a thumb at the margin, a mark small and old and hard to counterfeit. Rosa straightened the tape that read Sandbox, not because it needed straightening, but because love places its hands on the nearest true thing when it has no other work. Maya's shoulders eased the smallest measure, the way a mind relaxes when a door unlocks. "We are ready for the next part," she said. Carter looked at the case, the cabinet, the wall of measured green. "Execution," she answered, "not a threat and not a promise. Simply the word that follows reveal in a grammar the room now spoke." "We proceed," Blake said, lifting his chin by a breath the room already had. Morning sat on the glass with a steady hand and made edges honest. The city outside drew itself in clean lines. Inside, the room learned a quieter sort of focus, the kind hospitals know just before rounds begin. The hum beneath the floor kept its low oath. The white ring on the wall clock had already turned and begun again, a loop with yesterday folded into it like a secret. Dr. Sarah Carter set her palm on the flat silver case, as if checking for a pulse. The sealed cabinet waited, square and patient. The witness log lay open, its lines neat as rails. The manual with pencil shadows rested on the table, soft at the corners, the look of a book that has been believed. Rosa straightened the strip of tape that read Sandbox and let her hand fall, lemons still threading the air like a small brave flag. Maya slid her chair a necessary inch. The movement that meant a new phase had started. The aluminum edge against her wrist felt familiar now, a safety rail on a tall stair. Her fingers hovered above the keys, the little porch where questions came to stand in line. The map behind Harrison Blake still spilled its handsome tangle of lines and nodes, but a new path ran through it. The one Carter had drawn with seals and circles and hours written in words. "We proceed," Blake said, wearing the voice of a statesman and the smile of a salesman. He angled his shoulders so the lens could hold him and the catalog at once. "Today we translate proof into action." "Execution," said Carter, the way a pilot marks a checklist. "Then method." She did not raise her voice. She brought a new document to the center of the table. "Change control plan." It read in neat letters. Copies slid to Munich, to Tokyo, to Detroit. The assistant uncapped a new pen and set a stack of fresh seals within reach. "Scope first," said Carter. "We do not touch the quantum core. We correct the layer that speaks to it. We do not push live where a life can be harmed, and never without a guard around the test. We walked the question through staging into production by a thin slice, watched by 3 sets of eyes and 3 kinds of instruments. Canary slice, said the director from Munich, dry and sure, a small percent, with a large conscience, measured and reversible, said the chief from Tokyo, writing the word reversible along the margin with careful strokes. The man from Detroit nodded, the way a bolt seats clean when pressure turns right. Along the left edge of the plan a ladder waited, each rung named sandbox, staging, shadow, slice, expand, freeze if a metric lies, roll back if a line breaks. Carter set the manual on the plan, as if pairing a prayer with a law. The question sits at each rung, she said. Every step speaks it out loud. Maya leaned close to the pane and felt the machine answer by steadying its breath. The first move was not a spectacle. It was a courtesy call. She asked a gateway to ask before it moved. In staging, the line lifted, calm and clean. She touched nothing in production. Carter watched 3 panes, not one, as the assistant murmured the names of instruments like a small psalm: latency, error, saturation. The lines behaved. Carter printed, circled the hinge, wrote the hour in words, signed, sealed. Witness lines took ink like a field taking rain. Blake stood mid-frame and framed the moment with polished language. Real leadership turns caution into cadence, he said. The words sounded glossy in the air and wrong against the paper. Rosa watched the rituals set like stitches. In other rooms she had polished long lanes until no seam dared show. Here the seam was honored. Here each thread was named and dated and shell. Her palm found the cool door of the cabinet, as if thanking a hinge for doing its simple duty. The second rung fell into place. Staging spoke to shadow. Real traffic moved through a copy that could not harm, and every answer stayed green. Maya counted a breath, then another. Then the patient span Carter marked with a raised finger. No flourish. Ask. Listen. Ask again. When the lines held, Carter lifted her chin a fraction. Shadow is sound, she said. Witness signatures arrived like small stones at the bank of a river. The seal whispered shut. Blake stepped nearer to the table and lowered his voice to the confidential register camera's love. The world is watching, he said. We will give them speed with safety. His hand hovered above the manual the way a man hovers over a relic, seeking a blessing he has not earned. Maya moved a single pane to production, a slice thin enough to see through. A Busgate asked. A buffer asked. A cache asked. The ordinary layer asked the vault whether its answer was ready before it tried to carry the weight. On the wall, red, thinned and green climbed without shouting. In a neighborhood a few blocks away, someone crossed a street without knowing a question, had made room for that step. We expand when all 3 instruments agree, said Carter. She pointed to the graphs like a teacher naming bones. Latency, error, saturation. She waited until the lines showed not joy but composure, then wrote the hour in words, and signed and sealed. The witnesses leaned close, with the deliberate care of people who understand that patience is power. A runner brought a page from operations below. External partners request a public announcement prior to expansion. Blake's hand closed on the slip with a crispness that could have cut if the paper had teeth. He turned to the lens with practiced gratitude. The world deserves to know. Transparency is the spine of trust. Announce after the slice is safe, said Carter, 2 fingers resting on the plan. Not before. Words do not lift weight. Work lifts weight. We can tell the story while we write it, Blake said, smiling at the idea of being both author and subject. Announce a test, while the test breathes, and you invite panic dressed as praise, said Munich without lifting his eyes. Announce when custody exists for the slice, added Tokyo, steady as a metronome. Blake shaped a concession the way a stagehand shapes light. Of course, process. As always, the slice widened, not by drama but by discipline. Questions behaved like citizens who had finally read the law and found it kind. A traffic arm rose because a path asked first. A merge waited because a downstream lane said not yet. In a hospital mirror that touched no real pulse, identity proved it belonged before it was washed. In a finance shadow where no actual dollar moved, a cache admitted it did not remember and asked again. Dignity returned to systems, the way strength returns to a back that has stopped pretending. Carter wrote the hour in words. She signed, she sealed. The stamp landed with a soft authority older than the building. The log gained another honest ounce. Blake saw a window where a hero leaps. He reached toward the control and the room felt his reach. The world narrowed. Time stretched, thin as glass. Fingers neared the toggle that would widen the slice beyond the plan. A small stunt for a large headline. The assistant's breath caught. Then the stillness broke with a sentence light as thread. "Please remove your hand from the control," said Munich. "Any deviation from plan will be logged as interference," said Tokyo. Eyes level, voice unraised. The word logged traveled through Blake like wire. He withdrew, offered a joke about eagerness, a soft thing for cameras that forgot the reach. A beat after they recorded it. The witnesses forgot the joke and remembered the reach. Maja never looked up. She kept to the holds. Ask, wait, ask again. The slice widened, and the room did not loosen its shoulders until all three instruments told the same calm story. Carter printed and circled, and wrote and signed and sealed, and read the seal, and set the page into the cabinet with the steadiness of someone lowering a sleeping child into a safe crib. Another slip came. External watchers request live commentary. Blake turned a voice that could pull a stadium through a straw. The world would benefit from play-by-play. Commentary invites interruption, said Carter. Interruption invites error. Error does not get to come. The man from Detroit cleared his throat. The floor knows the sound of a bad bearing. He said, "We do not add whistles while we listen for that sound." Blake tried a softer sabotage. A ribbon of glossy architecture footage beneath the metrics. Only color, only tone. The assistant reached, looked to Carter, and set both hands flat on the console. "We are under written control," he said, level as a spirit level. The phrase laid another ounce into the log without a pen moving. The slice reached the last planned rung and held. Carter marked the hour in words. She signed, she sealed. She read the seal in full, each letter a small square of certainty. She placed the page into the cabinet and rested her hand there for one breath. "Phase complete," she said. Rosa let out a small laugh that was not laughter so much as heat, leaving a room. She set her hand on the round of her daughter's shoulder and left it there the length of a long breath. Maya did not lean. She let the touch be what it was and kept her eyes on the pain. Blake tried for the book, not for a camera now, but for himself. Carter lifted the manual first. "This book taught the question," she said, and set it on the plan, as if the plan had been written inside it all along. A quiet fell that felt like felt, soft and weighty. Munich signed the witness line for the last step of the morning. Tokyo wrote the hour in careful script and pressed a small thumb at the margin. Detroit added his own thumb and gave a nod that belonged to engines and weekends and truth. Maya hovered her finger in the porch of air above the keys and felt the machine ease into the rhythm it had been asking for all along. The hum stayed low. Air stitched through the vents. The graphs breathed even. The plan lay open like a road. Finally walked in daylight. "Announce," said Carter, not a flourish, a permission. Blake lifted his chin. He faced the lens and opened his mouth, and the sentence that arrived did not belong to him. The assistant read from the plan. Execution has completed the scheduled phase under written control, with independent witnesses. Performance follows proof. Custody exists. Expansion proceeds by schedule. Carter turned to Maya. Ready for the next ladder, she said. Maya rested her fingers for the barest moment on warm keycaps, then lifted them again into the space where questions breathe. Ready, she said. Blake stood with his smile, arranged and nowhere to set it. The cabinet shone with its quiet seals. The manual kept its pencil ghosts. The witnesses wrote the hour in words and pressed their thumb. Outside, a bus tucked itself through a lane that felt a fraction kinder. Inside, the room learned to keep a promise after the lights came up. The plan did not look triumphant. It looked correct, and beyond the glass, a brighter light gathered. The kind that does not ask permission when it steps in. Noon gathered on the glass and held steady, a bright sheet that made edges honest. The city beyond drew itself with clean lines and patient angles. Inside, the room took the quiet of a chapel that expects truth rather than grief. The hum beneath the floor kept its low promise. The cabinet stood square and calm. Seems even. Ziel's cool. The manual with soft corners waited on the table like a witness who does not fear questions. Dr. Sarah Carter closed the change plan and set the flat case atop the cabinet. Her palm rested there, not to claim it, only to feel its settled weight. The witness log lay open beside a pen that had learned to tell the truth in ink. Rosa smoothed the strip of tape that read Sandbox, and lifted her hand as if straightening a collar before a photograph. A thin ribbon of lemon worked through the air. Maya sat where the glass knew her wrist, fingers above the keys without touching them. The little porch of air had taught her patience and the shape of good questions. The pane showed green lines that held like stitches. The white ring on the clock turned again, less a circle now than a road walked in daylight. Harrison Blake stood between the rolling map and the lens with shoulders set for a stage he still believed he could own. Beyond the doors, cameras waited behind stanchions. Reporters tested microphones. A cluster of board members settled near the hallway with voices trimmed to sound like reason and to smell faintly of fear. "We announce," said Carter. The word did not rise. It stood. Blake lifted his chin. "Of course," he said, and moved toward the doors, with the step of a man who has trained himself to be first through any frame. "Not yet," said Carter. She placed the witness log in his path. "Sign, please." Hour in words. He looked down as if the page were a polite stranger who had arrived without warning. He took the pen. He wrote the hour in letters that had not practiced humility. He signed. His name kept its sharp edges. Carter countersigned, her line even. She read aloud the words on the seals that would travel with the case and closed the log. Munich and Tokyo moved to her shoulders without crowding. Detroit stayed near the cabinet with the unshowy gravity of a mechanic beside a lift. "Ready," said Carter. The doors opened. Sound rolled in and folded back at the sight of the room. No banner, no flourish, wood and glass, and the square honesty of steel. Lights woke, microphones blinked. A hush fell as if the air tilted its ear. Blake stepped to the lectern that had been rolled to the glass. "Good morning," he said, and the old music warmed his voice. "Our company has always stood for courage and for innovation and for—" Carter entered the frame without touching him. She set the flat case on the lectern and placed the manual beside it. She faced the room, not the lens. "Change control has completed the scheduled phase under written supervision with independent witnesses," she said. "Performance follows proof. Custody exists. Expansion proceeds by plan. The words did not perform. They accounted, pens moved, lights blinked. A hand rose near the front. Dr. Carter. What went wrong? Not an attack. A request to understand. Carter turned a sealed sleeve so the paper caught light. Our systems were told where they should have been asked, she said. Small words carried great weight. We corrected the layer that speaks to the core. We tested where no life could be harmed. We wrote it down so telling would not lie. Another hand. Did the child fix your company? Laughter tried to rise and thought better of itself. Maya felt heads turn and did not shrink. She kept her hands over the keys. That small porch of air. The machine answers when you ask it a good question, she said, the line plain as water. Carter angled the manual so the camera could see the pencil shadows that lived in its margins. She learned from what you threw away, Carter said, and set the book, where soft corners met hard light. Blake found an opening and took it. Leadership invited scrutiny. He said, leadership created a culture where such correction was possible. Silk and steel cut from the side. Leadership tried to widen a slice beyond plan, said Munich without looking at him. Tokyo added, any deviation was logged. The room tasted the word logged and knew its flavor. Detroit set 2 fingers on the cabinet. We prefer the version that asks, he said. Microphones caught the sentence like a statute spoken aloud for the first time. A board member cleared his throat, the sound of a chair reclaiming itself. What is the financial exposure for this delay? He asked. Eyes on Blake. Carter answered before fog could be summoned. Delay lasted as long as writing takes when you do not lie, she said. The exposure was to pride, not to safety. Systems run better today than last week. The graphs speak. The seals swear. The witnesses stand. Cameras found the men from abroad and the man from the plant. They did not pose. They nodded once, each in the language of his own country and craft. Rosa stood inside the doors and watched faces rather than lenses. She knew the moment when a person stopped performing and started listening. She saw it move along the first row when the manual met the case, and the neat script of hours in words filled the screen. A reporter in the center lifted a card. The wager, he said. The promise you made when you set the clock. Where is that now? The room held still for the time a heart takes to choose a path. Blake drew himself square as if a verdict were a mirror. He opened his mouth, and the sentence came thin. We will honor. Carter lifted the witness log. The terms were written and witnessed, she said. Payment releases when custody transfer is complete and policy updated. The money is a headline. The work is the repair. The room took the correction like a spine finding alignment. Even the microphones steadied. Another hand rose. What about blame? Was this sabotage, negligence, or culture? Maya spoke before anyone else could choose the easier answer. Teaching the wrong habit is a kind of theft, she said, a gavel wrapped in cloth. We put the right word back. Cameras blinked, surprised that plainness could be brighter than light. Munich said policy by noon, and his watch did not argue. Tokyo said audit by design and not by accident. Detroit did not speak. He pressed his palm to the cabinet once and let it go. Blake felt the light tilt away and tried to lean after it. He lifted both hands in a gesture that had opened rooms for him for years. This is what leadership looks like, he began. And the sentence found no place to sit. A murmur at the back drew a narrow line of attention. 2 agents waited at the threshold in dark suits, patient as courthouse steps. Not a raid, an appointment the story had made with itself when a habit had been taught where a question should have lived. They did not move toward the lectern. They spoke to counsel in low voices and took notes that did not smudge. Carter did not look away. She opened the flat case and lifted a sealed drive. She read the seal in words and handed it to Munich. She lifted a second and placed it in the hands of Tokyo. She set a third upon the manual and signed a transfer line. Rosa stepped forward when Carter nodded and took the manual between both palms. It looked small and heavy at once. "Who holds the book?" a reporter asked, almost only to herself. "She does," said Carter, and the sentence carried more rooms than the building could hold. Rosa slid the manual into a clear bag that had been labeled the night before. She wrote the hour in letters. She signed with a hand trained by mops and keys and the slim wrists of a sleeping child. The bag closed with a slow breath. The sound was soft, and every microphone heard it. The board member tried once more, a thin edge under his tone. "Are we to build policy around a child?" "Around a question," said Carter. "Around writing that can be checked. Around proof." Maya looked at the screens and saw her own hand above the keys. The little porch of air. She saw the green lines holding. She saw neat circles and hours in words. She saw a cabinet that did not pretend to be anything but a door. She felt Rosa near her. The lemon. The quiet. She said no more. The room had learned the sentence it needed. Questions thinned. Answers did not perform. They named and showed and read. The glare dimmed. Not because the lights changed, but because the room stopped dressing itself and chose to stand as it was. Carter closed the case and pressed each latch. The small clicks were heard. She passed the witness log to the assistant, who held it as if it were a small light. She stepped back from the lectern. The moment did not end. It settled. Blake spoke again, softer now, as if he had found himself in a room with a new teacher. "Me apologies," he said, "not to microphones but to air. I underestimated. I dismissed. I spoke when I should have asked." No one answered with words. The room answered with a silence that did not punish. It recognized. It was the sound of a door closing clean. The agents at the threshold spoke with counsel, and with a woman from audit, whose pen did not pause. They did not cross into the frame. The story knew where to look. Outside, sirens kept their distance. A bus tucked through a lane that felt a measure kinder. A crosswalk blinked with a rhythm that made sense to tired legs. In a hospital across the city, a mirrored feed held its honesty, not for love, but for proof. In a dark rack room, fans breathed an even song of work done properly. Inside, the witnesses signed the last line they were owed. They wrote the hour in letters. They pressed their thumbs to the margin. The cabinet received the final page of the day and did not flinch. Carter turned to Maya. "Ready for quiet?" she asked. Maya looked one last time at the pane. The green held. The questions held. She lifted her hands from the porch of air and set them in her lap. "Ready?" she said. Rosa raised the back of her hand to Maya's cheek and laid it there, light as memory. "Proud," she said, and stepped away before the lens could turn love into a scene. The room eased as if someone had opened a window and bled the pressure. The board retreated to rooms where phones would argue and policy would be born with the red face of anything dragged late into life. Reporters drifted like birds that had eaten enough. The agents left a card the color of old paper with a time in words. Blake remained a breath longer than needed, then followed his board with a gait that had learned a new angle. The lens did not follow him. It lost interest, the way light loses interest in surfaces that no longer reflect. Carter took the case in one hand and the log in the other. She nodded to Munich and to Tokyo and to Detroit. They nodded back, each in the way his country bows to work well done. No handshakes for show. Their names were already signed. Maya pushed her chair in with the care of a child who understands that furniture is not a prop. She touched 2 fingertips to the aluminum edge, as if to thank it for teaching a boundary she could trust. She glanced at the cabinet and at the tape that read Sandbox. She smiled without showing teeth, the kind of smile a room makes when it keeps a promise after the lights dim. They left through the service corridor. The air there smelled of cardboard and soap, and the soft iron of elevator ropes. Rosa walked between Carter and Maya, not holding either, near enough that a shoulder could find a shoulder without breaking the moment. At the loading dock, a man in a linen shirt swept a square of sun into a neat corner. He tipped his chin in a greeting that belongs to night crews and long hauls and modest work. Carter nodded back. Maya lifted a hand and let it fall. Rosa said thank you to no one and to everyone. Their car arrived when called and idled without ceremony. The city did not tilt. A pedestrian crossed with a cup of coffee and lost nothing. Cranes kept their patient cough. The day trusted itself. Maya watched her reflection in the window and saw Rosa and Carter beside her. No crown, no headline, only the edge of the clear bag in Carter's lap, the pencil shadows inside like old whispers that had decided to stay and be counted. The computers stop being scared when you ask right, she said. And when people ask right, it takes longer, said Carter. But yes. Rosa turned her face toward the glass as daylight laid a warm stripe across her cheek. The lemon on her apron caught light and handed it back as if a small cloth could brighten a streak. Behind them, the air in the room remembered the shape of proof. The hum held, the seals cooled. The white ring continued its quiet work. No speech lingered there, only the even breath of machines and the faint print of thumbs along a margin. Sometimes, the hardest courage is the quiet kind, the kind that asks instead of obeys, that keeps showing up when the world says you don't belong. Public light reminds us that fairness doesn't arrive in grand gestures. It grows in small, consistent acts of truth. Maya's question wasn't just for a machine. It was for all of us who have ever been told to stay silent, to follow orders, to accept how things are. Her story tells us what every grown heart already knows. Gold doesn't fear the fire, and the fire reveals what's real. We live in a world where power often mistakes volume for authority, but the true test of character is how gently we can insist on what's right. Standing up doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes it means refusing to bend the truth. Even when no one is watching, the exposure was to pride, not to safety, Carter said. And in those words lies a modern truth. It's not weakness to question. It's wisdom, asking the right questions. At work, in relationships, in society, is how we stop handing control to those who thrive on silence. So, if this story moved you, tell me how. Have you ever found your own way to speak up, even when it cost you comfort? Share your thoughts below. Your story might light someone else's way. And if you believe in stories that challenge injustice and celebrate quiet strength, give this video a like and subscribe to stay close for more. Until next time, may you find peace after noise, light after shadow, and the quiet kind of courage that keeps asking gently, fearlessly, until the world answers.